Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. You ever notice how strange it is that the people who live closest to us often know us the least? I mean, we might share a wall, a driveway, maybe even a garden fence, but still feel like strangers. Or worse, like silent rivals. I used to think neighbors were like extended family. People you could lean on in hard times, laugh with in the good ones. Turns out, sometimes the people who smile at you every morning are the same ones secretly collecting ammunition to use against you. I remember when I first moved into this building. I was optimistic, maybe even a bit naive. I baked a pie for my upstairs neighbor, helped another one carry groceries. I'd wave to everyone, strike up little chats in the elevator. That kind of thing. I thought I was building community. But what I didn't realize back then was that being too open, too fast, is like handing someone a key to your private world without ever asking if they know how to respect your space. Carl Jung once said that every person carries a shadow, not just a metaphorical one, but a real psychological presence that includes all the parts of ourselves we repress or deny. And here's the thing. When you're too transparent with people who haven't earned your trust, you don't just show them your light. You awaken their shadow. You give them something to project onto, something to envy, judge, or manipulate. It's a quiet kind of betrayal when it happens. Nothing dramatic, just little shifts. A strange tone in a good morning, a subtle smirk, a conversation that goes cold. And you're left wondering, what did I do? But the truth is, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just honest in a world that doesn't always know how to handle honesty. You were warm in a place that's used to cold civility. You gave, thinking you were planting seeds of friendship, but you didn't realize you were sowing discomfort in people who didn't know what to do with sincerity. One time, after months of friendly exchanges, I finally had what I thought was a real heart-to-heart with a neighbor. We stood in the hallway for nearly an hour, talking about our families, our jobs, even some of our worries. I left that conversation feeling connected, like we turned a corner. But the very next day, I passed him in the stairwell, and nothing. No hello, just a glance, then silence. And the next week, I heard from someone else that he thought I talked too much. That stung. Not because he pulled away, but because I realized how quickly people turn intimacy into ammunition. How being real with the wrong person doesn't build trust. It builds discomfort. It made me look back on my childhood, on the way my grandmother used to whisper warnings like, don't air your dirty laundry, or not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. Back then, I thought she was just old-fashioned, maybe even paranoid. But now I understand she wasn't cynical. She was just experienced. Growing up in our post-Soviet world, you learn early that privacy isn't just a preference. It's a survival skill. There's a kind of unspoken code here. Keep your cards close, your voice down, and your personal life off the neighborhood radar. Not because people are inherently bad, but because they're still carrying wounds, old ones. Envy, insecurity, pride, all the quiet poisons that live just below the surface. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. Knowing that your vulnerability might awaken someone else's resentment, that your joy might stir up their bitterness, that your progress might feel like a threat to someone who's stuck. But here's what I've learned, and it took some bruises to really get it. Just because you want connection doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your peace to get it. Not everyone deserves front row access to your life. Not everyone can handle your truth. And that's okay. You can still be kind, still smile, still wave. But you don't have to overshare to feel worthy of belonging. There's a strange kind of peace that comes when you stop performing, when you stop needing others to approve of your story, and instead just live it, quietly, confidently, knowing that your life is sacred, even if nobody else fully sees it. Sometimes we mistake proximity for intimacy. We assume that because someone lives nearby, they somehow understand us, or worse, that they should. But true connection isn't built on distance or daily encounters. It's built on empathy, on respect, on mutual emotional safety. And if that's not there, if the shadow in someone else gets triggered by your light, you have every right to retreat. It's not rejection. It's self-protection. And sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the kind of life you're trying to build. So if you've ever felt that strange shift with someone next door, if you've ever wondered why your openness led to silence, just know it wasn't about you being too much. It was about them not being ready. And you're still allowed to be whole, even if others can't hold the fullness of who you are. There's something incredibly human about wanting to share good news. It's like a spark inside that needs air, a little celebration that feels incomplete until someone else hears it. When I first started finding my footing financially, picking up freelance gigs, getting some traction online, I was proud. Not in a boastful way, just relieved. Like maybe all the long nights and quiet sacrifices were finally paying off. So when a neighbor asked how things were going, I didn't hesitate. I told him, just casually, mentioned that I've been doing some side work on the computer, picking up some freelance projects to help cover things. I even smiled when I said it, thinking maybe it would inspire him, or at least make for a friendly exchange. What I didn't expect was that a week later, he'd knock on my door asking for help. Not just advice or guidance, but actual work. He had a project, needed something done. Thought I could just take a look. I said yes, thinking it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. It quickly turned into him assuming I'd do things for free because we were neighbors, because I had the skills, because he thought he was entitled to my time now that he knew what I could do. When I finally brought up compensation, the whole tone changed. Suddenly, I wasn't helpful. I was greedy, selfish. He said things like, "I thought we were cool," or "It's just a small favor." And before I knew it, our entire relationship shifted. That light sense of camaraderie evaporated. He stopped saying hi. I caught him talking to others about me, making little comments, subtle digs. And I realized it wasn't the money. It was the discomfort. My success, even a modest, hard-earned one, made him feel something he didn't want to confront. Maybe envy, maybe inadequacy, maybe a deep resentment that I had something he didn't. That's when I started seeing the pattern. It wasn't just him. Every time I mentioned something positive, a new gig, a tech upgrade, a personal win, I could feel the room shift. The congratulations were thin, the interest performative, and sometimes the silence was louder than any words. It hit me that we don't live in a culture that easily celebrates others, especially not quietly, especially not in small communities where comparison is constant and boundaries are blurry. Carl Jung talked a lot about projection, how we unconsciously cast our own unmet desires or hidden resentments onto others. And that's exactly what was happening. My neighbor wasn't upset with me. He was confronting parts of himself that my growth stirred up. I became a mirror, one he didn't want to look into. But you know what? That's not my responsibility. And it's not yours either. We're not obligated to dim our light to make others feel comfortable. We're not required to shrink our progress just to protect someone else's ego. But we are allowed to choose discretion, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. We get to decide what to share, when to share it, and with whom. And sometimes the safest answer is nothing much. Just staying busy. I used to feel guilty about that. Like I was hiding something. Like being vague meant I was being inauthentic. But the truth is, protecting your peace is a form of authenticity too. It's knowing that your joy doesn't need to be validated to be real. It can exist quietly, deeply, in a space only you inhabit, and still be sacred. Over time, I've learned to keep some victories private. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I've seen how the wrong ears can distort the truth. How what you meant as a lighthearted share can turn into gossip, resentment, or manipulation. It's strange. The moment people know you're doing okay, they start to do the math. They think in terms of favors, loans, leverage. It's not even always malicious. Sometimes it's just survival instinct, old wounds, scarcity mindsets. But regardless of the reason, you end up in a position where your worth is measured not by who you are, but by what you can give. And that's a dangerous space to live in. So now, I practice emotional minimalism. I share, but sparingly. I celebrate, but inwardly. I let people earn their way into the intimate corners of my life. Not by default, not just because they're nearby, but because they've proven themselves safe. And when someone asks how work is going, I smile and say, keeping busy. Because that's the truth. And it's enough. So if you've ever felt that sting, that shift in someone's gaze after you shared something you were proud of, you're not imagining it. And you're not wrong for pulling back. You're just learning to protect what matters. Your story is still yours, and you get to decide who gets to read the next chapter. There's a strange vulnerability that comes when you try to be honest about your past, especially the parts you're not proud of, the things you've worked hard to leave behind. You tell yourself that if you've grown, if you've changed, then maybe people will see that. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll even respect you more for it. But it doesn't always work that way. There was a time I felt ready to open up, to be real about some of the things I'd done when I was younger. I wasn't a criminal mastermind or anything, but I had made bad decisions, gotten caught up with the wrong people, said and did things I regretted. I'd spent years rebuilding, not just my life, but the way I saw myself. And then, in a moment of what I thought was connection, I told a neighbor. I don't even know why exactly. Maybe I was tired of pretending. Maybe I thought he'd get it. Maybe I was just craving some kind of raw, unfiltered truth between two adults who had both seen life in its darker shades. He nodded, said it was cool, that we all had a past. I felt relief. 2 weeks later, that same neighbor tried to use my story against me. Not in a loud, obvious way. It started with small hints. A comment about how I probably knew some tricks when we were talking about a break-in nearby. A joke about me being the tough guy in the building. Then one day, when I refused to help him with some home repairs, he leaned in and said, "Would be a shame if people knew about the stuff you used to get into." Just like that. A threat disguised as a smirk. I stared at him in disbelief. I could feel the blood leave my face. And in that moment, I realized something that hit harder than the betrayal. No matter how much you change, some people will never see past your history. They'll use it as leverage, as ammunition, as a way to control you. That night, I sat on my couch thinking about everything I'd worked for, the person I'd become, the peace I'd earned, and how one moment of trust, one attempt at honesty, nearly shattered it. Jung once wrote that our shadow contains not only the bad we hide from the world, but also the strength we haven't yet owned. And I thought about that. How maybe the real mistake wasn't telling my truth, but telling it to someone who wasn't strong enough to hold it. We live in a world where redemption is romantic in books, but inconvenient in real life. People love the idea of transformation, as long as it's tidy, as long as it doesn't make them uncomfortable. But real change is messy. It comes with scars, with shame, with stories we wish we didn't have to carry. And when you open up to the wrong person, they don't see your growth. They see an opportunity. But I'll say this, I didn't cave to the threat. I didn't apologize or explain. I looked him in the eye and told him, calmly, "If you're going to tell people about my past, go ahead. But make sure you include how far I've come." He never brought it up again, but we never spoke after that either. It's not easy living with the weight of your own shadow, especially when others try to use it to define you. But that's the thing about healing, it's not for them. It's for you. And you don't owe anyone your story. Not unless they've earned the right to hear it. Not unless they're capable of seeing you as a whole, not just a chapter. These days, I carry my past differently. I don't hide it, but I don't offer it up like a gift either. I protect it, like something sacred, because it is. It's proof that I've fought battles and walked out alive. So if you've ever shared something personal and had it thrown back at you, please know that doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave. And next time, you'll know better. You'll choose more wisely. And that doesn't mean you're closing off. It means you're evolving. And if someone ever tries to reduce you to your past, remind them, the past is a place you've been, not a place you live. There's a moment, a very specific kind of moment, when you realize your home doesn't feel entirely like yours anymore. When the air inside your own walls carries the faint echo of someone else's presence. Not a stranger, exactly, but not someone who belonged there either. That's what happened after I made what I thought was a harmless decision. I was heading out of town for a 10-day trip, just a break, nothing extravagant. Some rest I'd earned after months of work. I told my neighbor, the one I trusted most, that I'd be gone and asked if his wife could water the plants a few times. I even gave him a spare key. We'd shared dinners before, watched each other's pets, borrowed tools. It felt normal, safe. I came back to a spotless apartment. At first glance, nothing was out of place. But there was this feeling like someone had moved through the space a little too freely. The cushions weren't quite how I'd left them. My favorite coffee mug was drying on the rack. And on our new bed, the one my wife and I had saved up for, there was a long, dark hair. That might sound small, even silly, but it hit me like a punch. Later that evening, I asked about it. And with this offhand casualness, my neighbor said, "Oh yeah, my brother and his girlfriend stayed a few nights. Just thought it'd be more comfortable than their place. Hope that's okay. No epalegi." No sense that anything was wrong. It wasn't just a line that had been crossed. It was like the entire concept of boundaries had evaporated. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't even have the words. My wife was furious. I felt betrayed, invaded, and, strangely, ashamed. Ashamed that I'd misjudged someone. Ashamed that I hadn't protected the space that meant the most to me. We didn't speak after that. Not really. There was a heated confrontation. Some yelling. Maybe even a shove. Then silence. And a crack in a neighborly facade that never healed. Jung said that when we ignore the darker aspects of people, when we project goodness onto others without discernment, we do so at our own peril. That truth hit home harder than ever that day. Because the danger wasn't in trusting someone. It was in assuming they saw the same sacredness in my space that I did. That moment changed how I move in the world. Not in a paranoid way, but in a quieter, more intentional way. I stopped announcing my comings and goings. Stopped giving away timelines or travel dates. I learned that sometimes even well-meaning people can't help but overstep when given the chance. And it's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just thoughtlessness, a lack of awareness, a belief that closeness equals entitlement. But that doesn't make the impact any smaller. What I took from that experience was this. My home is not just a place I sleep. It's where I heal, where I think, where I create and cry and recharge. It's where I come back to myself. And that space deserves respect. It deserves protection. And if someone doesn't understand that, if they see it as just another place they can access when convenient, then they've forfeited the right to be part of it. After that, I started being more vague when people asked about trips. Maybe going somewhere. Not sure yet. Still deciding. It felt strange at first, like I was hiding something. But I realized I wasn't hiding. I was preserving. There's a difference. I think sometimes we confuse openness with connection. We think that sharing details makes us closer to others. But real connection doesn't require a schedule. It doesn't ask for your itinerary. It asks for trust, respect, and boundaries. And if someone can't honor those, they don't deserve deeper access. I still believe in kindness. Still believe in community. But now I also believe in locks, both physical and emotional. I believe in the right to say no without guilt. And I believe that my peace, my inner sense of security, is worth more than someone else's comfort. So if you've ever felt guilty for holding back, for being vague, for not inviting others into every corner of your life, let me just say this. You don't owe anyone your transparency, especially if that transparency puts your safety or serenity at risk. Your space is sacred. Your silence is sacred. And protecting both is not selfish. It's wisdom born from experience. I think one of the most fragile illusions we carry is the belief that our personal life, our relationship, our family, our home dynamics can remain untouched if we simply pretend no one notices. But walls, no matter how thick, don't always keep things in. Especially not the sounds of arguments. Especially not tension. I learned that the hard way. There was a period when things between my partner and me weren't great. Nothing catastrophic, just worn down. The daily grind. Unspoken frustrations. The little resentments that build when no one wants to start a fight, but everyone wants to be heard. One night it all came out. Loud voices, slammed doors, raw honesty wrapped in heat and hurt. It wasn't our proudest moment, but it was real, human, messy. The next morning, as I was heading out, I ran into a neighbor in the stairwell. She smiled, one of those smiles that felt more like a smirk, and said, "Hope today goes better than last night." We heard quite a show. Then she winked, like we shared some inside joke. Only I wasn't laughing. I don't know if it was embarrassment or anger that hit me first. But what stayed with me was something deeper, this feeling of exposure. Like our private struggle had been dragged out into the cold, public air and pinned to the wall for all to see. And it wasn't just that one moment. After that, it felt like people looked at us differently. A little longer, a little closer, with curiosity, pity, judgment. That's when I started to understand why our grandparents always whispered things like, "Don't bring the family's business into the street." It wasn't about shame. It was about dignity, about protecting something intimate from being diluted by public perception. Carl Jung talked about individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all the fragmented parts of ourselves. And for many of us, that process begins at home, in our relationships, in the way we confront or avoid conflict, in the way we navigate love, disappointment, longing. But when your private life becomes public fodder, it stops being a space of healing. It turns into a performance. You start to edit yourself, even inside your own house. You argue more quietly, or not at all. You don't reach for each other, not because the love is gone, but because the audience might still be watching. And that's devastating, because your home is supposed to be the one place where you can fall apart and put yourself back together without needing to explain the process to anyone. I started to notice how even small things, a sigh, a slammed drawer, footsteps pacing too long, were being observed, noticed, filed away by neighbors who had nothing better to do than piece together your life from behind their curtains. And it makes you retreat, not just from your neighbors, but from your own emotional honesty. You start whispering things you used to say freely. You tiptoe around your own emotions, because somewhere along the line, your home stopped feeling like yours. But I'll tell you what changed it for me. One day, I caught myself hesitating before opening my front door, just standing there, hand on the knob, wondering who might be in the hallway, what they might hear. And I realized I was living in a cage built from other people's opinions. And the door? It wasn't locked. I just forgot I could walk out. That day, I made a decision. I stopped caring what they thought. I stopped adjusting my voice, my life, my marriage, to fit the imagined comfort of people who never once asked how we were doing, only what was going on. But more importantly, I started building emotional walls inside my physical walls. Not to shut out my partner, but to shield our relationship from the weather of the outside world. I stopped venting in the stairwell. I stopped answering nosy questions with anything other than, "We're good, thanks." I chose my words the same way I chose my furniture. Intentionally, for comfort, not display. We still argue sometimes. That's just life. But we do it with care now, with the understanding that our relationship isn't a spectator sport. It's a sacred space, and the less noise we invite into it, the clearer we can actually hear each other. So if you've ever felt the sting of your private life being too visible, if you've ever been the subject of whispers because someone overheard your worst day, I want you to know this. You're not alone, and you're not broken. You're human, but you don't owe your healing to anyone else's curiosity. Let them speculate. Let them gossip. They don't get to write your story. Because the real work, the hard conversations, the silent forgiveness, the midnight apologies, that's all happening where it matters most. And no one needs to understand it but you. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you stop explaining yourself. When you realize that not everything about your life needs to be on display. Not your money, not your struggles, not even your gifts. But for the longest time, I didn't see it that way. I used to think that being open about everything made me more relatable, more real. If someone asked how much I made, I'd answer. If they wanted to know how I managed my budget or where I kept my savings, I'd tell them. If they complimented something I owned, I'd tell them exactly where I got it and how much it cost. I thought I was being generous, helpful, honest. But there's a thin line between openness and exposure. And I crossed it more times than I can count. It always started the same way, a casual conversation, a neighbor making small talk, maybe admiring my new TV or asking how I managed to afford a certain appliance. And without hesitation, I'd share the full story, maybe even a little too proudly. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things would change. There'd be a shift in the way they looked at me, in the way they spoke. They'd come around more often, ask for help with small things, then bigger things, then money. And when I started setting boundaries, the warmth vanished. It wasn't even that I refused to help. It was that I stopped saying yes to everything. And suddenly, I wasn't generous anymore. I was difficult, stingy. Someone even said, "If you've got it so good, what's the harm in helping out?" That line hit me hard because it carried an implication I couldn't ignore, that what I'd earned wasn't really mine, that I owed it to the people around me simply for having it. It took me a while to understand what was really happening. It wasn't about money. It was about perception. Once people had a number, an idea of your income, your possessions, your skill set, they began to assign value to you based on what you could give them. Not who you were, but what you had. And that realization broke something in me. Because I never want to be measured that way. Not by neighbors. Not by anyone. Jung wrote about how people unconsciously turn others into objects, projections of their own inner voids. You're not you anymore. You're a symbol of wealth, of luck, of opportunity, of something they think they deserve but don't have. And the moment you stop playing along, the resentment surfaces. It's subtle at first. Side comments, cold shoulders, but eventually it grows. Because people don't always want to see you, they want to use you. And if they can't, they'll discard you. That sounds harsh, I know, but I've lived it. I've seen how one honest answer about a raise turned into a rumor about me being rich. How one act of generosity became a never-ending expectation. How one yes locked me into a cycle of obligation I didn't know how to exit without damaging relationships. And here's the truth no one tells you. Protecting your peace sometimes will damage relationships. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. Now, when someone asks about my income, I smile and say enough to get by. When they ask about savings, I say, oh, here and there. When they compliment something expensive, I shrug. Got lucky with a discount. I don't owe them the full picture. And neither do you. Your life isn't a community bulletin board. Your talents aren't public utilities. Your success isn't a neighborhood resource. You get to decide what's shared and what's sacred. And listen, it's okay to help, to give, to show up, but do it on your terms, when it feels right, when your soul is aligned with the offering. Not because someone expects it, not because silence feels awkward, not because you're afraid they'll stop liking you if you say no. Because if liking you is contingent on access to what you have, that was never real connection anyway. So if you've ever felt that discomfort, that sense that someone's kindness was laced with expectation, trust it. That's your intuition protecting you. That's your soul saying, be careful with this one. And you be wise to listen. The greatest freedom I've found, it's not in having more. It's in needing less from others, in giving less away carelessly, in choosing carefully who I let close. I still believe in generosity, but now I pair it with discernment. Because some things are better kept to yourself, not out of secrecy, but out of self-respect. Sometimes I look back and wonder, how much of my life did I give away simply because I didn't know how to say no? We spend so much of our time trying to fit into spaces where we're not even meant to belong. We go out of our way to explain ourselves to people who don't understand us. We share our deepest parts, thinking it will bring us closer, make us loved, make us accepted. But there's a dangerous kind of vulnerability in that. When you open up too much, too quickly, without discernment, you invite people into your life who may not have the capacity to hold your truth. And that can lead to a kind of emotional depletion you won't notice until it's too late. I've been there. I've been the one who overshared, the one who gave too much of myself too easily without realizing that it wasn't generosity. It was self-sacrifice. I wanted to be liked. I want to be accepted. So I made myself small so others could feel bigger. I kept offering pieces of myself to people who only saw me as a resource, not as a person. And it hurt, because I gave the parts of me that were sacred, the ones I should have protected, the ones that, once given away, couldn't be returned. But there's a quiet power in learning how to protect your peace. I don't mean living behind walls or becoming cold. I'm not talking about shutting people out. I'm talking about knowing your worth, understanding your boundaries, and deciding with intention what to share and when to share it. And sometimes that means saying no to people who don't get it. Sometimes it means letting them wonder. It means letting them fill in the blanks, even if it makes them uncomfortable. I've learned that not everyone gets to know everything about me. And that's okay. It's not about hiding. It's about choosing who gets the privilege of seeing the real, unfiltered parts of who you are. Not everyone is capable of handling that. There's something profoundly liberating about keeping some things to yourself, about learning that your worth is not determined by what you can give away, but by what you decide to keep for yourself, what you keep sacred. In a world that constantly demands more honesty, more openness, more transparency, the most powerful act of rebellion is to claim your own space. To say, this part of me is not for you. And if they don't understand, that's not your problem. There's freedom in restraint. There's power in knowing that some things are too precious to share, too vulnerable to expose to the world. And the more you protect those parts, the more you discover how strong and whole you truly are. Because here's the thing, the world doesn't need to know everything about you to love you. Your friends don't need to see every corner of your soul to accept you. And the people who truly care about you, they'll respect your boundaries. They'll see the parts of you that matter, and they'll cherish them without demanding access to everything. It's the people who can't respect your boundaries who are the ones that will drain you. They're the ones who will take without giving, use without appreciating, and then wonder why you're exhausted when you've given all you had. But here's what I've learned. You can't pour from an empty cup. And you can't heal if you're constantly being bled dry by people who don't deserve your openness. So I guard my peace now. I protect my sacred spaces. And I choose wisely who I let in. And if someone tries to take more than I'm willing to give, I step back. I create distance. I don't explain myself. I don't owe them an apology for keeping parts of myself whole. This is my life, my story, and the parts of me that are truly mine, they belong to me, not to anyone else. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.